Well, good night. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is, in fact, the Talamanca Review, is what I believe I called it. Am I live? Yep, I think I am, yeah. Saturday night walkabout. So I just thought I'd come on, have a podcast. I don't have a whole lot structured or... What's going on there, buddy? Ready to go? But, what's got you all spooked? My dog running over here. I don't know what's up with him. There we go. Okay, again, let's start over. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. And, we're kind of spinning out here. I was going to do a very structured walkthrough of Stardust Ranch, The Incredible True Story. But it's sort of morphing into these more impromptu, jazz-like... is this on? Yep, it's on. These sort of jazzy... is what I would call them, these sort of jazzy, impromptu podcasts. And I want to talk about a few things tonight. There's a few things on my mind. I want to go over a little bit more what I did in the last two things. And I want to talk about spiritual maturity and being able to stand in the playground of the cosmology and being able to be your own man or your own woman, being able to stand up to the bullies or the mean girls, and being able to stand up for yourself and saying, I'm a divine being, and I have a right to exist, and I'm a sovereign being. And I'm going to walk through here, and you're not going to stop me. And there's a tremendous power in that. And you're not really going to understand how much power there is in that until you try it for yourself. And I'm speaking to those of you who've reached out to me and those of you who have sent me messages talking about your experiences with the paranormal, which is an absolutely, I think, wonderful thing. Hi, BB. Why don't you call in the 864-810-1039. I got my headset already configured. I can switch over to it. Or Skype me at SeenThatTinker1 if you want to call in. Starting to have your own experiences. And what you want to do is you want to start to sanctify yourself, okay? So there's this process in human beings that creates a kind of superpower in us, and it has to do with sanctifying yourself. And this means that you make yourself holy. And you make yourself holy by containing and holding as much of the love energy, the love from above, okay? Which is an energy. And as much as you can hold in your body and in your consciousness, in your mind, and in your being, okay? And you'll feel it. You'll feel the God energy when it's in you. It's a sense of centeredness and presence and being. And it's generally achieved through prayer, meditation, the two of them. I don't know why that camera just keeps going back and forth like that, but it is. And just being your own person. And really what it comes down to is surrendering more and more and more of yourself to the divine. And this isn't a personality thing. It's not about putting on a robe, growing out your beard, wearing beads, or putting on the robes of a nun in a Buddhist order, although there's nothing wrong with that. It's got nothing to do with a personality. There's no such thing as a holy or a spiritual personality. Persons are non-existent in the eyes of God. They're artifices we create to move around in the world we live in. But the person doesn't exist in the divine realm. Okay? Aspects of you do. okay, but not really what we would call the person as we know the personality here, okay? And surrender means giving more and more of your perspective and your decision making process and all of these things to God, I guess, or the universe if you want, but I don't like that language. It's too cold for me. Okay? So you just give yourself over to the divine and the divine will take care of you. And I'm living proof of this. I've tried it. I've tested it in the most dangerous of circumstances, and I've come out okay. And things that try to harm me do not come out okay. And it's because I've put a lot of time and energy into sanctifying myself and into making myself an instrument of, or an anchor, if you will, of the divine energy on the physical plane, which is the highest form of service, by the way. And this is leading in a little bit to what I wanted to talk about tonight. So we'll get into it a little bit and talk about it. I would look at, in the time we're living, I would look at the divine. So there's a number of words you can put in there. Because I was born and raised in the West, I use the word God. Some people would use the word enlightenment, where your consciousness merges with the eternal life force, but they don't necessarily have a God. I'm okay with that too. I don't get all hung up on the language. By the way, people who get hung up on the language, they do that because they don't really know what they're talking about. And so they can't really talk from an experiential point of view. They try to stay within a language construct that makes sense to them, okay? Because there's no dexterity or mobility in their consciousness. And you see this not only in religious people, but people who get into what you might call benign occult practices like astrology and things like this. They get locked into a certain language and a certain way of looking at things. Okay? So let's take, for example, the concept of a Mercury retrograde in astrology, which is a day or a period of time. It could be a little bit longer than a day, but it's usually a day when you want to kind of be more reserved in what you do, okay? And I didn't know about Mercury retrograde. I've never studied astrology in my life, but I will tell you an absolutely extraordinary Mercury retrograde story that happened in my life, and it goes back to, I think, 2018. So I had to go to Panama, and I had to get a visa renewal. At the time, I wasn't married, and I had to leave every 3 months to get a visa. They've since changed that, actually. It's now every 6 months you have to leave the country, so it's much more comfortable for people to live here. But at that time, you had to leave every 3 months, so you had to leave 4 times a year. And I had all my preparations in place. And I woke up at about 4:30 in the morning, and I had a very strong dream. And in the dream, I was in a shoe store at the Panama-Costa Rica border on the Caribbean side. So everything in Costa Rica has a Caribbean side and a Pacific side, just like the United States and Canada. But we don't think about it in those terms so much because the distance between the Pacific Ocean and the Atlantic Ocean is, I don't think you could drive across the country in less than I don't know, like in Canada you couldn't go from Newfoundland to British Columbia in less than 9 days of straight driving, and if you drove 8 hours a day. I know that train I spoke about, the Sunset Limited, which derailed in Arizona, I think that was 24 hours from Miami to Los Angeles. But that goes faster than a car, and it's going without stopping for 24 hours straight because you don't need to stop. All your refreshments and your bathroom and everything are right on the train. But if you were to try and drive that, it would be 4 or 5 days of driving, 8 or 10 hours a day probably at 60 miles an hour. But over here, Central America is very thin. Okay, so if you look at the map, Central America is this thin strip that joins North America, which is Mexico, Canada, and the United States, with South America, which begins with Colombia and encompasses Peru, Bolivia, Chile, Uruguay, Paraguay, Brazil, Argentina, Guyana. I think that's it. Venezuela. I think that's all of South America. Yeah. Yep. Yep. And it's also quite big from Atlantic to Pacific. But the Central America is very thin, and the thinnest point, of course, is Panama, which is why they built a canal through there, for trading routes, okay? The Panama Canal. That's why they did it, because it's a very thin point. So I was on the Caribbean side, and I was in a shoe store, and I bought a pair of boots, and they literally sort of fell off my feet before I could even get out of the store in the dream. And I turned around to address the sales lady, and she had this look on her face that was like no refunds, and I woke up. I was like 4:30 in the morning, and I went, wow. I wonder what's going to go on today when I go to Panama. And then when I drove down the mountain, a black cat crossed in front of us. Okay, this is like 5:30 in the morning, 5:15 in the morning. Black cat crosses right in front of me, and you really don't. And it was really weird to see, and it was far from any farmhouse. You usually don't see cats so far from a farmhouse or somebody's house up here. Okay. And then further down the road, there were 3 turkey vultures standing on the road, which I've never seen since, and I've been up here 7-8 years. Okay, so if you've never seen a turkey vulture, they stand about 4.5, 5 feet tall. They're massive birds. They're carnivores, and they're really, really quite frightening to lay eyes upon. And they're jet black. They're jet black the way a crow or a raven is jet black. They're jet black. And then they have these blood red skull caps. Right? So there's these hideous looking birds, man. They just, everything about them says death and carnage. And they were just sitting on the road. And, you know, as I approached in my Suzuki Samurai, with my then girlfriend with me, they sort of flew off the road. But there was the dream, the black cat, the 3 turkey vultures, and then I got on the bus, I went to Panama, and everything went haywire, and I couldn't get across the border. And it was literally just a shit show. And when stuff like this happens to you, you think like you're being attacked or something. Okay? But this is why I say, so being me, I just sort of figure everything out and I go, okay, I shouldn't have traveled today. I should have taken the dream as a warning and pushed my travels off one day. But I didn't. And so that was a Mercury retrograde. So why am I talking about astrology? Oh, yeah. So, I mean, there's some truth to it, but I don't need the language of astrology. I just find it cumbersome. And Ecuador, yeah, thank you very much. I missed Ecuador, yeah. Hi, Joshua. So that's what happened, and it was a Mercury retrograde. So sometimes, like, I think the Mercury retrograde has something to do with the thinning of the veil. But there are times in life where you're just, for lack of a better way of putting it, you're going to get jacked, okay? And it just happens. And the most you can hope for is that you learn to ride these currents and sort of get through them. Um, I watched or part of a podcast yesterday. It's a guy I watch once in a while. He is an astrologer, but much more than that, actually. His name is Robert Phoenix. You might have heard of him. I watch him on Rumble once in a while. And I just had this intuition to check in with him. And I only do that maybe once, maybe twice a month. And I checked in with him, and he did a show yesterday on Rumble, very similar to The Gates of Hell, where he brought this fellow on called Russ Winter. And they talked about Chabad Lubavitz, Tikkun Ola, which is the cleansing or purging of the world. And they talked about, this impending Jewish genocide. And look, this is real, okay? I don't have an anti-Semitic bone in my body. I actually enjoy the Jewish friends I've been fortunate enough to make in my life. And I find them remarkable people, really hardworking, especially anything to do with mental work. I've never met people who can study harder except maybe the Chinese. And I think this comes from generations of studying the Torah. And you have to respect it. Okay? You have to respect it just like you have to respect um, the poetic prowess of the Irish, or the athletic prowess of the Black Americans, or anything else, the heart center of the Latin people. Everybody's got something, right? Like the Creator gives us all a kind of portion of things, and some people get more of one thing and less of another. And your fortune in life, in large measure, depends upon what is favored in the time you live. So right now, mental capability is favored. I think it's overfavored. I don't want to sound like a communist, but I think labor deserves much more than it gets, especially skilled labor. People who do really good work that takes 3, 4, 5 years to master. And all forms of work like that take a number of years to master. It takes a number of years to become a competent carpenter. It takes a number of years to become a competent worker in cement and cement finishing and all of the epoxies and coverings that go on cement. Like polished cement floors in office buildings, and it's an art form. Trades are minor arts, okay, and it can take quite a while to learn a trade. But right now, mental prowess is in fashion, and along with that has come a tremendous prosperity for the Jewish people, because the application of mental work is a forte of that culture. And as I've said before, they're a remarkable people. They've been literate for centuries, whereas the rest of the world has only been literate for maybe 75 years, maybe 100 years. Okay? And this is no small thing, okay? So when you think about epigenetics, like things carrying over in the heredity and the genetics of a people, erudition, study, reading, concentration, these are all things that the Jews have in spades. And it has to be respected, okay? I have no tolerance, really, for anti-Semitism, for hate-filled chauvinism against any people. That said, I am talking about the rabbinical desire to wipe out most of the world tonight. And it's a reality. Okay? It's an absolute reality. This is different than listening to somebody talk 10 years ago about the Jews, or the Zionists in particular. Let's narrow our focus. And the Zionists extend beyond the the Jews. There's many non-Jews in the Zionist fraternity. They would not be referred to as goyim by the Jews. These people might be referred to as righteous Gentiles. Okay? Now, as a faith and as a religion, I think Judaism is a joke. Okay? I think it's an absolute joke. I think there's no light in it. I think there's no love in it. I think it's anti-love. Okay? And I think that these are a people that are absolutely controlled by a dark entity. You know, if you're keeping up with Cliff High, he calls them the Elohim worshippers. And you'll find more and more people talking about this topic now. And it's because it has to be talked about now. We're at the 11th hour now. Okay? This is really... So when I talk about the event horizon in The Devil and Us, this is it. Bringing it into more focus, okay? It's about recalibrating the world. It's about killing a bunch of people. It's about... And this is why you get all of these mental conditionings over the last 150 years. Remember when I interviewed Kat and she cited Darwin as the beginning of the rise of Satanism? And I in a subsequent podcast, I said, it's really interesting to me that she begins it at Darwin. Because what Darwin does is he begins to plant the seeds for the rationalization of a man-made evolution. Okay? So evolution is a natural process according to Darwin. Okay? So, meaning that groups of human beings don't dictate what forms of life stay and what forms of life goes. It's a force outside of man. The evolutionary force in Darwin's theory is outside of man. It's something of a divine force, you could say, but Darwin would not call it that. Okay, he would just call it a mechanism of nature, and how nature is constantly trying to express itself with superior expressions of life forms. Okay, so it tries one in a region, the life form doesn't work, it doesn't make it, or a condition of the region changes. The temperature, the water level, the moisture level, the available food, and a certain species goes away. Now, this is a very fascinating topic to me because, as I continually mention on the Talamanca Review, here in the Talamanca Mountains, I probably have more forms of life than any other part of the world, except for maybe certain parts of the Amazon basin down around the Peru and Brazil border. Okay? And I've explained this before, but repetition is a big part of learning, and a podcast is about teaching, so I'm going to repeat myself. It's because of all the differing elevations in the mountain ranges where I live. And it's because of the thinness of the landmass between the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans, the volume of rain, and the proximity to the equator, which creates a very even environment for life. So 12 hours of light, 12 hours of dark, 12 months a year. So it's the opposite of the poles, the Arctic and the Antarctic. Okay? And in this natural laboratory, life forms are everywhere. Okay? I promise you all of the life forms here in the Talamanca have not been documented. Okay? And there are certain life forms that can only exist at a certain elevation. Okay? You know, if you go 10 meters below or 10 meters above where they are on the mountain, a certain kind of frog, they'll die. That's how specific the allocation of life in the natural system is. It's absolutely remarkable. And to my sensibilities, everything that's born has a purpose, except for humanity. And when I say purpose in this instance, I mean a purpose in the natural system. Man sits atop the natural system. We've been over this before. And so predation for us is inside our heads. It's all in our heads, people say, and they're right. It's all in our heads. Okay? So what preys on us? Well, it can be these paranormal forces that so many people are experiencing. Reading Stardust Ranch, reading The Light of Darkness, and reading The Devil in Us. People are having paranormal experiences. And I would counter that if you have an experience reading one of these books. If I, I I would say that the experience was just you becoming aware of something that was always going on, and the book created an object out of the thing because of the vibration of the book, separated it from the subject of you because you thought it was part of you, and in that distance you saw it for the first time. How do I know this? Because I've spoken with about a dozen people who've had paranormal experiences. And when you start to do an, an, an examination of their life and the traumas therein, you can pretty much pinpoint it. Okay, so it probably attached when you were 17 and this happened, and you've been now carrying it for 30 years. People carry stuff on them. Okay, so we get these parasitic entities on us, and they're not demonic per se. The best way to look at it, and this is why I'm so hard on Christianity, okay, because it doesn't teach you correctly, in my opinion. Okay? Um, yeah. I can't keep up with all the chat, guys. I'm sorry. I just glance over. Thanks, Kitty. That's very nice of you to say. What an unusual name, Kitty Black. It sounds like a female character in an Ocean's 11 movie. Um, so think of it more like cats and dogs getting fleas. Human beings get entities because we have we have a psychic environment inside of us and around us through our aura. The other animals don't have this per se. They don't have the fifth element of ether that creates the connection to the inner worlds. Okay? Only human beings have it on this planet, and that's why we're at the top of the creative process. So just just see these entities as like a leech you got stuck on you going walking through a forest pond or something. You come out of the pond and there's a little quarter-inch leech on you, and you just get a cigarette butt or a lighter, or you apply a little heat and you pull it off and you flick it off. There's not the leech isn't evil. It's just trying to live like you. It just got, and it's the same thing with a lot of these entities, right? And a lot of them are self-created because our consciousness is so powerful, we can create entities which come back to us in an object form. Okay? So this is a lot of what's going on, and so just like this rainforest I live in is a magnificent ecosystem. It's a corollary to the incredible psycho-spiritual ecosystem that I explore auditorily through hearing things and visually through seeing things in my meditations. There's a whole energetic ecosystem inside of us too. And the thing that gives life and sustenance to all of these ecosystems is what I would call God. And God is indiscriminate. Okay? God is indiscriminate. The true creator has as much love for a blade of grass, a tree, or a dog as it does for a human being. So anybody who tells you they're the chosen people of a God is fucking nuts. Okay? And you know, especially if they say that God is the creator of all things seen and unseen. I could certainly understand the people saying we have a very special relationship with a God. And in fact, all of the magical systems do. So when you study Santeria, when you study the African religions specifically, when you study Palomayombi, when you study Voodoo, there are certain gods they've been working with for millennia in these religions. Some people say all of this goes back 100,000 years to the Congo in Africa. And I'm inclined to believe that, actually. By the way, I believe the Spike Lee theory and the theory of Michael Tellinger that Africa was the cradle of civilization in this epoch. And this epoch is way bigger than 6,000 years. It's like, I don't know, like a 250,000 years. I don't know. I really don't get into the anthropology and all that stuff. I'm just a guy talking. And really, at the end of the day, I see myself as a form of journalist, but a journalist that goes beyond just the senses and just what you can see, hear, taste, touch, and feel. And the concepts like physics and stuff like this. My journalism brings other dimensions into it, okay? But really, at the end of the day, I'm just a journalist. Stardust Ranch is journalism, Light of Darkness is journalism, and The Devil in Us is journalism, okay? It's spiritual journalism, is how I would put it. Got to hit my puffer, folks. Hi, Sun Warrior. Thank you very much. I've been enjoying how you incorporate the podcast to include the trilogy of books. Thank you very much. Don't be afraid to read my fiction. You will see the Bruce McDonald that wrote Stardust Ranch, Light of Darkness, and The Devil in Us 20 years ago in God as an Economist. You'll say, oh my God, he was aware of these things when he was like 19, 20 years old. And I was. Okay? I started to become aware of these things, okay, after just a few years of meditation diligently. And then it just becomes more and more refined as you go on throughout your life. So we were talking about this, parasites and stuff like this, and creating a harmonic resonance that separates entities from you so you can see them in an object sense. And the object seeing of them will be a paranormal / supernatural experience. And the injection of fear into this is the product of our misaligned religious teachings, specifically Christianity, Islam, and not the Jews. I mean, they deal with this stuff quite handily. The rabbis do, anyways. Okay, and they're very competent with the fourth dimension. The rabbis, okay, they can exercise what they call they in Judaism. They don't necessarily believe in demonic possession, but they believe that a dibuk, a dead spirit, can come into your body like a dead human being. Which amazes me that they haven't produced in the Jewish community a Jerry Marzinsky giving the spiritual explanation for schizophrenia, because they clearly know what it is. But then they'd lose billions of dollars in pharmacia and psychiatry, which is a very heavily Jewish-dominated business. But I assure you that this Tikkun Olah, what is it called again? Tikkun Olah or whatever, but it's this cleansing or purge that the Jews are talking about. It is coming. But unfortunately for them, it's not going to be what they think it is. It's going to be the opposite of what they think it is. There's that great line in Rounders, the poker movie with Matt Damon and Ed Norton and John Malkovich playing the Russian, about professional poker players. And at the end of the movie, Matt Damon is narrating. I know I reference movies a lot, but I'm a writer. Give me a break, okay? 3-act structure. And at the end of the movie, he's narrating and he says, if you ever sit down at a poker table and in 5 minutes, if you don't know who the mark is, and the mark is the weak player who's going to lose all their money, if after 5 minutes at a table you don't know who the mark is, you're the mark. Okay? You're going to lose your money. And so, oh, you're very welcome, Kitty, and Sun Warrior, and Joshua. Anybody can call in, right? So if you want to call in, just call, I'll answer. And then I'll slip on my headset so we don't get the echo, and we'll take a call and we'll talk about anything you want to talk about. So I feel the need to really go over this a number of times, the spooky guy, the gates of hell, this Saturday night walkabout, because this is a huge thing I'm talking about, okay? Now, remember what else I say in my podcasts, in that we live in a reality where nothing is hidden from us, but nobody's going to tell you. Okay? And so, if you look at the last 10 or 15 years, every other movie has a big portal opening and negative entities coming in, whether they be demonic, extraterrestrial, or what have you. whether it be the Avengers, whether it be, I coincidentally can't think of one right now, but you get what I'm saying. Um, there's always some portal opening up and something coming into the world, right? Now remember, you're a portal, okay? So you're a portal, and you can go out of the portal of your body. This is documented by numerous spiritual scientists like Robert C. Monroe in Journeys Out of the Body, various other people. All the meditation schools teach it. So when you see a Buddhist interviewed on a TV show or a documentary or something, it's considered impolite in spiritual culture to get into the deep esoteric stuff in a public space like that. So the fact that they've never come right out and said that like meditation is more than just sitting, they always tell when they ask them, well, what is meditation? Well, you sit still and you begin by concentrating on your breath. That's stage one in a 100-stage process. Okay, by like stage 2 or 3, you're leaving your body, which is really what meditation is about, which is what samadhi really is. Okay, it's not just sitting still in a trance; it's whew, going out of your body. Dying while living is the spiritual art of all arts. Dying while living. And so this is going on as well. Now, I want to touch on a few things tonight. Number one is psychic versus spiritual. Okay? Because as the religious systems fall away, we're getting all of these raiders coming in, spiritual raiders. And a raider is somebody who would attack a caravan halfway through a desert journey or something, the Bedouin raiders or something, right? Or the stagecoach robbers in the Old West. But it's when you're between one civilized place and another civilized place, and you have something that's valuable at the center point or thereabouts, there's a small possibility you might be attacked and robbed because you're so far from help, so far from the place you left, and still quite far from the place you're going. And I call these people raiders, okay? Highwaymen, raiders, whatever you want to call them. And a lot of people have left their old religious roots now, which are in Christianity, and a lot of Jews have left Judaism too. When I say there's a Jewish conspiracy, I don't mean it's the Jews. I mean it's a small group of whack jobs. In this case, primarily Chabad Lubavitch, this really whack job sect that started in the 1800s in Lithuania, and they're fucking whack jobs. Okay, I don't mind saying that. You know, they're very nasty people, very proficient in black magic, but go for it. You know, I'll suck up a little bit of your energy. And that'll be my way of slowing you down, because fuck you. Fuck you. Okay? And they're planning a culling of the race. Now, remember what I told you. I mean, when an enlightened Jew or a rabbi says God, they mean themselves or the Jews. And I said yesterday myself that you are God. So in a sense, they're right. But it's not you as a personality. It's not you indulging your desires from the body. Okay? The God in us is something that could just as easily tell us to sacrifice our bodies. Okay? Which many of the saints and mystics and masters have done in the past to make a point or to persist in pacifism in their mission. Okay? It's not just the Jesus crucifixion story, although I don't believe he was crucified, but it's not just the Jesus story. When you get into mystical literature, dozens and dozens and dozens of these people have been decapitated, flayed alive, boiled, burned. There's just something about this human race. We just love to kill holy people, okay? It's just a passion of ours. I'm amazed that God still sends messengers into this realm, to be honest with you. And it's really kind of amazing to me, but he does, or it does. I don't want to be gender insensitive here. It does. So, what? Oh my God, you're going to read the Russian princess case. Okay, so I had Elena Chudakova in my head for 6 months, but thank you, Sun Warrior. Good luck with that. Please report back to me on that, okay? I can't believe you picked up The Russian Princess case. It's a huge book, too. It's just under 500 pages. Longest book I've ever written. And true crime nonfiction, a Canadian murder, folks. But I'm all over the place, remember. All over the place as a writer. And the only thing I haven't really spent a lot of time on is poetry because, nobody really reads it anymore. There's no money in poetry. You'd have to live off grants, and you're not going to get any grant money unless you're, I don't mean to be insensitive, but unless you're like a lesbian minority woman, you're not going to get the grant money, okay? So, these raiders are generally psychics, as we're in halfway through this journey between leaving our traditional spirituality and getting to a new based spirituality, which is foundational and real. Okay? And we're on our way there. Don't kid yourself. We're on our way there. But at this midpoint, we've got all these raiders now. And here I'm talking about people like Teal Swan, Andrew Bartzis, and people like them who charge out, who become millionaires, right? So they're like New Age Joel Olsons. At the height of his infamy, Andrew Bartzis, which was charging $5,000 for a 1-hour Akashic record reading. And it was a fucking farce. He was semi-accurate. He didn't really give a shit. He could be high when he was doing them. Just an absolute piece of shit. Okay? And Teal Swan's no better. In fact, I think another thing that's going on is there's a lot of people who were trained or they developed psychic abilities in the programs. They were raised in a satanic family. And by the way, that is psychic is satanic spirituality. Communism is satanic politic, and psychic is satanic spirituality, because psychic is agnostic to being right or wrong. That you get knowledge of the future and knowledge of another person's thoughts, independent of their privacy, without permission from God, and without a real spiritual purpose to help them or help humanity. And as such, it's a violation of spiritual law. And if you've watched these psychics closely enough and you know them long enough, they all get hit by trains. They all just get karmically walloped at some point in their life. And God always does it with irony, right? Like they get run over by a train. And you're left wondering, well, if they could see everything, how come they couldn't even see the train? You didn't even need to be psychic to see that. All you had to do was hear the whistle and see the bright light and get off the tracks. And they couldn't even do that. But God does it to teach the rest of us a lesson. And I'm telling you, I don't think the divine likes these psychics very much, and these soothsayers and these occultists at all. They're tolerated because this is a free will space. Okay? And God does not break his rules. Once the rule sets in place, the rule sets in place. So they can do these things. Okay? But if you're deliberately trying to unfold psychic abilities, you're just wasting your time. Even if you do it, you're not going to do yourself any good in terms of reducing your karma or benefiting your life or holding more of the divine in your heart, your mind, and your body, which is what you're trying to do. Okay? So there's a big difference between psychic and spiritual, and not a lot of people at this moment in history can tell the difference, because there's a lot of people getting sucked in by it. A lot of people getting sucked in by these psychics, okay? And like I said, they're just the new age version of Joel Olson or Jimmy Swaggart or Tammy Faye Baker and her husband, Jim and Tammy Faye Baker from the 80s, and all of these Christian phonies as well, okay? By the way, as a general rule, if somebody is charging you money for what is billed as a spiritual service, it's evidence that they're a fraud. It's against spiritual law to accept money for spiritual service, okay? These cosmic moral laws. And that's an easy one to figure out if you just think about it a little bit, because if we start charging each other for spiritual insight and spiritual service, what does that say about what we've become? It would be impossible for people who do that to build a real community. Okay? It would be impossible to build a real community with people who behave that way and people who live that way. Okay? Another thing I want to touch on tonight is the idea that evil is error. Okay? Never, when you encounter something that you might perceive as evil, like even what this thing that, let's say, that Chabad Lubavitch and the Jews are doing now, okay? I don't even really see that as evil, although most people do. But I just see it as error. I see it as people trying to cycle out of a 6,000 year history, trying to maintain the tradition of their ancestors, building upon the work of previous Rebbes, and trying to interpret the prophecies correctly, and in their way of thinking, trying to execute God's will correctly. And it's all entrained. It's culturally entrained. Okay? As another general rule, highly evolved spiritual people rarely come out of their birth religion. Okay, the people who really go on to high consciousness and have extraordinary lives that get documented and stuff like that, they usually end up finding the path that takes them to that consciousness. It's not something that they were born into. Okay? So, that's another thing. Evil is generally error. Okay? And one might go back to the Gospels and think of the words of the Christ as they're written in the Gospels, whether he was really crucified or not, but it's still an unbelievably beautiful story. Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. And this capacity to forgive and this capacity to love through almost any circumstance is going to be critical to your survival in the coming years. Because reacting and becoming reactive in the next 5 or 10 years is going to be very, very dangerous. Because the moment you're in a reactive state of mind, you can have things discharged against you from the astral. Okay? You've sort of let down your auric defenses and your divine defenses, and you've opened your portal internally, and you can be attacked. This is why the reactive state of mind is so bad. Very hard to stay out of all the time, though. I mean, you're allowed to have a personality. You're allowed to go, what the fuck, when your computer's not working and stuff like that. But I'm talking here about getting fully invested in deeply reactive states of mind. One example I would give you is the really heavily invested anti-Semite. Those people out on the internet, they're usually on BitChute or someplace like that. And the Jews are evil and this and blah, 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 blah. And it's just, you can see it just corrupting them, like what the ring did to Golem. You can just see it. They're being worked. I can see it anyways. I don't know if you can see it, but you can see them being worked on. And, I've known people like this, and when people are in this state, it's very difficult to get them out of it. Okay? Very difficult, because the facts they're engaging are not false, okay? But they don't have the spiritual maturity. They haven't done the 10,000 hours of prayer or meditation to really get a grasp on what they're dealing with and how to interpret it properly. And they end up charged with this reactive energy, okay? It's a very interesting thing, the concept of charging and discharging. It's everywhere in our society once you're aware of it. Charge your telephone, use it and discharge the battery. Charge you with a misdemeanor, discharge you when you're acquitted. Okay? Charge, discharge. Charge, discharge. Okay? You ever want to freak out a judge and a prosecutor when you're in court? You say, I don't consent to charge. I discharge myself. Just you would not believe some of the stuff I've done in a court with 100 people watching me in the early 2000s. I do not consent to being charged. I discharge myself, and I charge you. They don't know what to do, right? And if you don't get an old-time Mason on the bench as the judge who really understands what's going on, they just think you're crazy. Then they want to call the psychiatrists in. And this is because they've lost control of their own system now. Okay, so the magical underpinnings of all these systems, the British and the British Kabbalists, the British Jews, because remember, before World War One and World War Two, there was and still is, but there was a much larger Jewish diaspora in Britain. The Jews generally before Israel, they liked to be around the most prosperous and intelligent Gentiles. And they used to get along really well with the Germans, who are probably the most industrious, productive, and prosperous Gentiles on the planet. I have nothing but respect and love for the Germans, man. They're a remarkable people. And so there were a lot of Jews there and a lot of Masons. And Masonry had been going for a couple centuries, and they set up this whole statutory legal system, straw man system. This all comes out of Britain, okay? The legal person and all this, which is, as I've already explained to you when I went through The Devil in Us, is a voodoo doll, okay? A voodoo doll. And that voodoo doll is going to kill a lot of people now. People think I'm being coy with language when I say stuff. Oh, wow, that's a very interesting analogy Bruce drew. The legal person in the birth certificate is akin to a voodoo doll. No, it is literally a voodoo doll. And they're already pricking them, and people are dying, quite literally. But because I'm on YouTube, I can't say it out loud. Okay. And it's not that the voodoo doll, the legal person, controls you, but the legal person is the access to your whole life, your driver's license, your bank accounts, your job, your retirement pension from the government, your medical services if you live in a socialized medicine country, like all of the Commonwealth countries, New Zealand, Australia, Canada, United Kingdom. Okay, so your legal person, that voodoo doll is pretty powerful now. If they prick it, which would be symbolic of them cutting you off now, how you gonna live? You gonna crawl into the woods and start hunting elk with a knife like Rambo dropping down out of a tree? Very few people could survive in the world now. Okay, we've become very, very soft in the last 150 years. There aren't too many Jeremiah Johnsons left, if you've seen that movie. I'm getting back to my primitive roots here in the rainforest. And I learned how to butcher animals, and I did it, but mid-size animals like goats, lambs, and pigs. Never a cow. But and then I gave it up. I went back to vegetarianism, just vegetarianism, not veganism. I ate loads of yogurt, I ate loads of eggs, and I eat loads of cheese. Okay, and I just don't eat meat anymore. I don't want blood in my life. And that's just an evolutionary point I've gotten to in my meditative practice. I can literally feel blood in my system now. Literally, I've become that sensitive. Well, none of you cowards are going to call in, so that's 53 minutes. That's my Saturday night walkabout. And I just wanted to touch on a few things. I had made some notes and I really got to it. Psych is not spiritual. Charging versus discharging, and evil is error. So you really want to forgive everybody, okay? Even these Chabad Lubavitch guys that are trying to purge the world of Goyim, which they think is corrupting the world, because they're not following the laws that what they think is God gave to them, which is insane, okay? Forgive them, Father, they know not what they do. Just don't get worked up about it, okay? Don't get into a highly reactive state of mind. All right, that's it. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.